The Great Hall of Nexus Prime was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed inside it. Light from 3 artificial suns bathed the chamber in a golden glow that made everything look important and eternal. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, each one shaped to fit their unique bodies. Some breathed oxygen. Others breathed methane or ammonia. A few did not breathe at all. Ambassador Linda Pearson stood at the central podium, a small human woman surrounded by giants. The Valkyrie delegation towered above her, their insect-like bodies covered in shimmering green armor that was actually their natural shell. The Sirathi slithered in their water tanks, their serpentine forms coiling and uncoiling with impatience. The Mendicons sat like living mountains, their rocky bodies grinding against each other whenever they moved. Linda had practiced her speech 100 times. She had memorized every word, every pause, every gesture. This was the most important moment in human history. Earth had spent 200 years proving itself worthy of joining the Galactic Council. They had explored peacefully. They had traded fairly. They had never started a war with any species they encountered. Honored representatives, Linda began, her voice amplified by the translation systems that turned her words into 47 different languages simultaneously. Humanity comes before you today not as conquerors or beggars. We come as partners. We offer our unique fusion technology freely, asking only for the protection and friendship that membership in the Coalition Defense Pact provides. The fusion technology was humanity's greatest achievement. It produced clean energy more efficiently than anything else in the galaxy. Every species wanted it. Earth had decided to share it openly as a gesture of good faith. High Speaker Zethaner of the Valkyrie rose from his seat. His compound eyes reflected Linda's image 1,000 times. He was old by his species standards, nearly 200 years, and he had seen many young species come before the Council with hope in their hearts. The Valkyrie support humanity's application, he announced. In exchange for their generous gift of fusion technology, we pledge to defend Earth and all its colonies as if they were our own worlds. The vote was unanimous. Every species raised their appendages or flashed their lights or vibrated their approval. Linda felt tears forming in her eyes. Earth was no longer alone in the universe. They had friends now, allies, protectors. The celebration lasted 3 days. Linda attended parties on 17 different ships, eating food that ranged from delicious to nearly poisonous to her human body. She shook hands with beings that did not have hands. She made promises of eternal friendship that she believed with all her heart. 6 months later, everything changed. New Valencia was Earth's proudest colony. 12 million humans had built a paradise on a world with purple skies and silver oceans. They had farms and factories, schools and hospitals, parks where children played and old people watched the twin moons rise each evening. The Drath came without warning. Their warships appeared in orbit like a swarm of angry insects, 300 vessels bristling with weapons. The Drath were conquerors. They had taken 17 star systems through force. And the Galactic Council had always looked the other way because the Dreth were powerful and their victims were weak. Governor Henry Walsh sent the distress signal himself. His hands were shaking as he spoke into the communicator. Behind him, through the window of his office, he could see the first Drath, landing ships descending through the atmosphere. This is New Valencia calling the Galactic Council. We are under attack. Please send help. Please send anyone. Linda received the message while she was sleeping in her quarters on Nexus Prime. She ran through the corridors, bursting into High Speaker Zethaner's chambers without permission. The Drath are attacking our colony, she shouted. You promised to defend us. Activate the Coalition Defense Pact. Zethaner's antennae twitched. He did not meet her eyes. I will call an emergency session. The council gathered within hours. Linda stood at the same podium where she had given her hopeful speech, but now her voice cracked with desperation. 8 million people are dying while we talk, she pleaded. Children are being killed. Families are being torn apart. You swore an oath to protect us. Honor your word, Sirathi representative spoke first. Her translator gave her voice a cold, mechanical quality. The Drath are more powerful than we anticipated. Intervention would cost lives on our side as well. But you promised, Linda said. The Mendicon delegate rumbled like an avalanche. Promises must be balanced against practical concerns. Our people would not support a war with the Drath over a human colony. Linda turned to Zethaner. The High Speaker had personally guaranteed Earth's safety. He had called humans friends. He had accepted their technology with gratitude. Please, she whispered. Sed Ekinor's voice was quiet. The council must vote. One by one, every species that had welcomed humanity into their alliance chose to abandon them. The Velkari voted no. The Sirathi voted no. The Mendicon voted no. Even the small species, the ones humanity had befriended and helped, voted no because they were afraid of the larger powers. The final count was 47-0. Not a single voice spoke for Earth. Linda stood frozen at the podium. On the holographic display behind her, New Valencia burned. Drath soldiers marched through streets filled with bodies. Children screamed for parents they would never see again. The silver oceans turned red with blood. She watched until she could not watch anymore. Then she walked out of the chamber without speaking another word. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. Linda spent most of it alone in her cabin, staring at the walls. She had believed in the council. She had trusted them. She had convinced her own government to share their most precious technology because she believed that the galaxy was better than it actually was. When her ship landed at the spaceport in Geneva, Admiral Samuel Drake was waiting for her. He was a tall man with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had commanded Earth's defense forces for 20 years and had always argued against trusting the council. Linda handed him a datapad without speaking. On it was a list of every council member who had voted to abandon humanity. Names, species, voting records, everything she could gather. They left us to die, she said. Her voice was empty. All the tears had been cried out during the long journey home. Samuel took the datapad and studied it carefully. His expression did not change, but something hard and cold settled behind his eyes. Then we need to make sure they never forget the cost of that decision, he said quietly. That night, while the galaxy celebrated the easy defeat of another weak species, Earth began to plan. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, scientists received their new orders. On Luna, factories started building machines that no one outside Earth would ever see. In hidden bases scattered across a dozen asteroids, military officers gathered to discuss strategies that would take years to complete. The Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that abandoning humanity would make them disappear. They had forgotten that humans were survivors. They had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every day. They had conquered disease and famine and war among themselves. They had crawled out of caves and built starships, and they never, ever forgot a betrayal. The galaxy forgot about Earth. It happened slowly at first, then all at once. News reports mentioned humanity less and less. Trade routes that once passed through human space were redirected. Diplomatic channels went silent. Within 3 years of the New Valencia massacre, most species could not remember why humans had ever mattered. The Drath hegemony grew bolder. They seized 2 more human colonies in the first year, then a third in the second year. Each time, Governor Henry Walsh's surviving government sent desperate messages to the council. Each time the council voted to do nothing. By the 5th year, the Drath controlled half of what had once been human territory. Council members spoke of humanity in the past tense. A promising species, the Velkari ambassador, would say at dinner parties. Such a shame they could not survive the challenges of galactic politics. The Sirathi joked that humans had probably killed each other off in civil wars, as primitive species often did. The Mendicon did not think about humans at all. They did not know about the bunkers beneath the frozen surface of Mars. In a facility that did not appear on any map, General Patricia Owens commanded the largest military research operation in human history. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair that she kept cut short. She had been a combat pilot before the betrayal, flying patrol missions along the border of human space. Now she spent her days underground. watching scientists perform miracles. The main laboratory stretched for 3 kilometers beneath Olympus Mons. Thousands of researchers worked in shifts that never ended. They slept in barracks carved into the rock and ate food grown in hydroponic farms that never saw sunlight. Many of them had not been outside in years. "Show me the progress on the SHIELD project," Patricia said to her chief scientist, a young man named Kevin Moore who had graduated at the top of his class. Just 2 years before the betrayal, Kevin led her to a testing chamber where a small sphere floated in midair, surrounded by a faint blue glow. "The Valkyrie gave us their SHIELD technology as part of the membership agreement. They considered it outdated, something they had used centuries ago. But they never bothered to improve it because they thought it was good enough." He pressed a button on his console. A laser beam shot toward the sphere, powerful enough to cut through steel. The blue glow absorbed the beam like water absorbing a drop of rain. "We found a way to make it adaptive," Kevin continued. "It learns from each attack and adjusts its frequency. The more you hit it, the stronger it gets. Their ships will burn out their weapons before they scratch our paint." Patricia nodded slowly. "What about propulsion?" They walked to another section of the facility where Dr. Nancy Sullivan was waiting. She was older than Kevin, with wrinkles around her eyes and hands that were stained with engine grease despite her senior position. "The Sirathi slipstream drives were impressive," Nancy admitted. "For technology that is 200 years old, they gave us the specifications as a gesture of goodwill, assuming we would never figure out how to improve them." She pulled up a holographic display showing 2 engine designs side by side. "Their design on the left, our improved version on the right. We increased efficiency by 43%. Our ships will be faster, more maneuverable, and able to travel farther without refueling." Patricia studied the designs carefully. "And weapons?" Nancy smiled grimly. "The Mendicon plasma cannons they shared with us were considered state-of-the-art when they were invented. That was 400 years ago. They never bothered to develop anything better because no one could challenge them." She led Patricia to a firing range where a massive cannon sat on a testing platform. The weapon was sleek and elegant, nothing like the bulky Mendicon designs. "Focused particle beam," Nancy explained. "It fires a concentrated stream of charged particles at near light speed. It cuts through their shields like they are not even there. One shot from this weapon can destroy a cruiser." Patricia watched as the weapon fired at a target across the range. The beam was invisible to the naked eye, but the target exploded instantly into a cloud of melting metal. "How many can we build?" Patricia asked. "As many as we need. We have been stockpiling materials for years. The asteroid mining operations have given us more raw resources than we can possibly use." While the scientists built weapons, Captain Daniel Cho ran the intelligence operations. He was a quiet man who preferred to work in shadows. Before the betrayal, he had been a simple communications officer. Now he commanded a network of spies that stretched across the galaxy. His operatives had infiltrated every major power. Some worked as servants in the households of council members. Others posed as merchants, traders, or refugees. They gathered information constantly, sending encrypted messages back to Earth through channels that no one could trace. Daniel knew which. Drath generals were corrupt, and which were loyal. He knew the patrol schedules of every Valkyrie fleet. He knew the security codes for Mendicon military installations. He knew which council members had argued privately for helping humanity and been overruled by their colleagues. "Those ones we remember," Daniel told Patricia during their weekly briefings. "When the time comes, they will be treated differently." 15 years passed. Earth's population had shrunk as people relocated to the underground facilities. The surface cities were maintained as decoys, showing just enough activity to convince passing observers that humanity was slowly dying out. Schools continued to operate. Factories produced consumer goods. Everything looked normal to anyone watching from orbit, but beneath the surface, the Terran military had grown into something terrible and beautiful. 300 warships waited in hidden dockyards carved into asteroids and moons. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, combining the best of human innovation with everything they had learned from alien technology. Admiral Samuel Drake called his senior officers together in the war room beneath Olympus Mons. He was old now, Past 70, but his mind was sharper than ever. He had spent 15 years planning this moment. "The Horizon fleet is ready," he announced. "Every ship is armed, crewed, and supplied for extended operations. Our intelligence network has mapped every target worth hitting. Our soldiers have trained for every possible scenario." He looked around the room at the faces of men and women who had dedicated their lives to this moment. Some had lost family in the colonies. Others had simply believed in the cause. All of them had waited patiently for the chance to show the galaxy what humanity could do. "For 15 years, we have been silent," Samuel continued. "For 15 years, the galaxy has assumed we were dying. They forgot about us. They stopped watching. They stopped worrying." He pressed a button on the table, and a holographic map appeared showing the positions of hundreds of ships scattered across human space. "Today we remind them. Launch the Horizon fleet." Across the solar system, engines roared to life. Ships that had waited in darkness for years suddenly blazed with power. They slipped into slipstream one by one, disappearing from sensors and reappearing at strategic points across the galaxy. The council members were asleep in their beds. The Dreth were celebrating their latest conquest. The Valkyrie were attending diplomatic functions. The Sirathi were swimming in their heated pools. None of them knew that humanity had woken up. None of them knew that the silent years were over, and none of them knew that judgment was coming. The Drath homeworld was called Krathver, which meant heart of conquest in their guttural language. It was a harsh planet of red deserts and black mountains where the strong survived and the weak served. For 3,000 years, the Drath had launched their wars of expansion from this world. Their military academies trained the finest soldiers in the quadrant. Their shipyards produced the deadliest warships anyone had ever seen. 800 vessels patrolled the space around Krathver. Defense platforms bristled with weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. Ground-based cannons could shoot down anything that made it past the orbital defenses. The Drath believed their homeworld was untouchable. No one had ever dared to attack it. Commander Lisa Grant stood on the bridge of the battleship Defiance, watching the countdown timer on her display. She was 34 years old, born 3 years after the betrayal. Her entire life had been shaped by the promise of this moment. Her father had died on New Valencia. Her mother had raised her in the underground facilities beneath Luna, telling stories of the world they had lost and the justice they would one day claim. "Slipstream exit in 30 seconds, her navigator reported. Lisa nodded calmly. Around her, the bridge crew worked their stations with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this mission 1,000 times in simulators. They knew every detail of Drath defenses. They knew exactly what they were going to do. "All ships report ready," her communications officer announced. "The fleet is in position." The Defiance emerged from slipstream directly above Krathra, appearing so close to the planet that the Drath sensors barely had time to register its presence. Before 49 more ships materialized behind it, the Terran fleet hung in orbit like a judgment from the heavens. Lisa opened a broadcast, channel that every receiver on the planet would hear. Her voice was steady and cold. "This is Commander Lisa Grant of the Terran Reclamation Fleet. 15 years ago, you invaded our colony on New Valencia. You've killed 8 million of our people. You took our worlds while the galaxy watched and did nothing." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You have 1 hour to surrender your military assets and release all human prisoners. There will be no negotiation. There will be no second warning. Choose wisely." The Drath response came within minutes. Supreme Commander Thrak Valoom appeared on the view screen, his scarred face twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. He was the architect of the New Valencia invasion, the general who had ordered his troops to show no mercy. "Humans," he laughed, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "You come to our homeworld with 50 ships and demand surrender? You are either brave or stupid. Perhaps both." He gestured to someone off-screen. "Launch the defense fleet. Destroy these insects." 200 Drath warships rose from orbital stations, their engines leaving trails of blue fire as they formed into attack formations. Each ship was twice the size of a Terran vessel. Each one carried weapons that had conquered 17 star systems. The Drath pilots were veterans of dozens of battles. They had never lost. Lisa watched them approach without changing her expression. All ships, weapons free. The battle lasted 11 minutes. The Drath commander fired first, launching a barrage of plasma torpedoes that should have overwhelmed Terran shields. But the adaptive shield technology that Kevin Moore had developed absorbed the impacts effortlessly. The blue glow around each human ship brightened for a moment, then returned to normal. The Drath fired again. And again, their weapons struck Terran. Holes without leaving a scratch, then the humans fired back. Focused particle beams lanced out from every Terran ship simultaneously. The weapons that Dr. Nancy Sullivan had designed cut through Drath shields like they were made of paper. The first volley destroyed 30 ships instantly. The second volley destroyed 40 more. The Drath formation broke apart as panic spread through their ranks. Experienced commanders who had never known fear suddenly found themselves dying. Ships that had conquered worlds exploded into clouds of debris. The black void of space filled with the light of burning vessels. Supreme. Commander Thrakvaloom screamed orders into his communicator. Reform the line. Concentrate fire on their command ship. Someone do something? No one could do anything. The Terran weapons were simply too powerful. The Terran ships were too fast. Every advantage the Drath had counted on evaporated in the first minutes of combat. Lisa Grant watched the destruction without pleasure. She felt no joy in killing, even killing those who had murdered her father. She simply felt the cold satisfaction of a job being done properly. Launch the Reapers, she ordered. From each Terran ship, a swarm of small torpedoes emerged. They were called Reapers because they tracked their targets with impossible precision, adjusting course hundreds of times per second to avoid point defense fire. The Drath had never encountered weapons like these. Their countermeasures were useless. The remaining Drath ships died in minutes. 200 vessels that had terrorized the galaxy became nothing but floating wreckage. Lisa checked the time. 7 minutes remained in her deadline. Supreme Commander, she broadcast to the planet below. Your fleet is destroyed. Your orbital defenses are next. Then your ground installations. Then your cities. You have 7 minutes to surrender. Thrakvaloom appeared on screen again. His arrogance was gone. His face showed pure terror. How? He whispered. How is this possible? You were nothing. You were weak. We were underestimated, Lisa replied. You will not make that mistake again. The Drath government surrendered with 3 minutes to spare. Thrakvaloom himself transmitted the order for all military forces to stand down. He offered himself as a prisoner, hoping to save his people from further destruction. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light. Within hours, every species in the known universe had heard the reports. The Drath, who had terrified entire civilizations for millennia, had been defeated in 11 minutes by 50 human ships. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives scrambled to their seats, demanding explanations. High Speaker Zethaner pounded his podium for order, but no one was listening. How is this possible? The Sirathi ambassador demanded. Humanity was primitive. They had no military capability. We gave them obsolete technology that should have taken centuries to understand. They understood it faster than you thought, a calm voice said. Admiral Samuel Drake appeared on the main view screen. Transmitting from his command ship somewhere in deep space, he looked old and tired, but his eyes burned with satisfaction. You gave us scraps, he said quietly. Old technology you considered worthless, but you forgot something important about humans. We learn, we adapt, we improve. Every piece of technology you shared with us, we made better. Every weakness in your designs, we fixed. Every advantage you thought you had, we took away. Zethaner Santeni twitched nervously. What do you want? Revenge territory? We can negotiate terms. Samuel shook his head slowly. I want you to understand what you did. 15 years ago, you abandoned our people to die. You broke your promises because keeping them was inconvenient. You assumed we would disappear quietly. He leaned forward, his face filling the screen. We did not disappear. We have spent 15 years preparing for this moment. Right now, Terran fleets are positioned at strategic points near the territory of every major council species. We are not here to destroy you. We are here to make sure you never forget the cost of betrayal. The transmission ended. Across the council chamber, representatives looked at each other with dawning horror. They had created this monster. They had pushed humanity into the darkness and assumed they would never emerge. Now the darkness was looking back at them, and it was angry. The galaxy held its breath. Everyone expected humanity to begin a campaign of destruction. They expected fire and death and the end of civilizations. The council species prepared their defenses, called emergency sessions, and made desperate plans for survival. But the attack never came instead. Human ships appeared in the most unexpected places. They showed up in the territories of the forgotten, the abandoned, the exploited. Species that the major powers had ignored for centuries suddenly found themselves facing. Terran vessels that came not with weapons firing, but with offers of friendship. High Speaker Zethaner decided to take personal action. He gathered a diplomatic delegation of the finest Valkyrie negotiators and traveled to New Valencia, the colony that had been rebuilt after the Drath occupation. Human warships filled the orbit above, their weapons silent but visible. The Valkyrie shuttle landed at the main spaceport. Zethaner emerged with his antennae held high, projecting confidence he did not feel. He had brought gifts worth billions of credits. He had prepared speeches about renewed friendship and mutual benefit. He was certain that humans would listen to reason now that they had proven their strength. Colonel Margaret Shaw was waiting for him at the landing pad. She wore a simple military uniform without medals or decorations. Her face showed no expression at all. Zethaner recognized something in her eyes. He had seen that look before, in soldiers who had survived terrible things. He noticed the burn scars on her left arm, the marks of plasma weapons. "Hi, Speaker," Margaret said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I remember you. I watched your vote on a screen while my city burned around me." Zethaner shifted uncomfortably. That was a difficult time. The council made decisions that, in hindsight, were mistaken. We see our errors now. We wish to make amends. "Do you?" Margaret asked. "Tell me, High Speaker, what amends can bring back the dead? What gifts can return my mother to me? She was holding my hand when the Drath soldiers found us. She pushed me into a drainage tunnel and told me to run. I heard her screaming while I crawled through the darkness." The Valkyrie delegation stood frozen. This was not the negotiation they had prepared for. "I was 14 years old," Margaret continued. "I spent 3 days in those tunnels, eating garbage and drinking contaminated water, before the evacuation ships found me. I watched from orbit as the Drath burned everything I had ever known." She stepped closer to Zethaner, close enough that she had to look up to meet his compound eyes. "And do you know what the worst part was? It was not the death. It was not the fire. It was knowing that help could have come. It was knowing that 47 species had promised to protect us, and every single one chose to break that promise." Zethaner's antennae drooped. "What do you want from us? Name your price." "Territory? Resources? Technology. The Valkyrie will pay whatever is necessary." Margaret smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We do not want your territory. We do not want your resources. We do not want your technology. We built better versions of everything you gave us years ago. And what? We want you to live with the knowledge that humanity remembers. We remember every vote, every silence, every turn back. We remember the names of every council member who chose politics over justice. And we want you to know that we will never forget." She turned and walked away, leaving the Valkyrie delegation standing alone on the landing pad. They returned to their shuttle without speaking. The journey home was silent, while the major powers struggled to understand what humanity wanted. Admiral Samuel Drake implemented what he called the Terran Doctrine. It was simple in concept, but revolutionary in execution. Human fleets would not conquer. Human soldiers would not subjugate. Instead, they would protect. The Krith were a reptilian species that the Mendicon had used as slave labor for 8 centuries. They worked in mines and factories, dying by the thousands in unsafe conditions. Their homeworld had been stripped of resources. Their culture had been nearly destroyed. The Galactic Council had never lifted a finger to help them, because the Mendicon were powerful and the Krith were not. Captain Ryan Palmer arrived in Krith space with 20 warships and a simple message: "We are here to help. If you want us to leave, we will leave. If you want us to stay, we will stay. Either way, no one will ever enslave your people again." The Krith had never encountered a species that offered help without demanding something in return. Their leaders were suspicious at first. They expected tricks, hidden agendas, secret demands. But Ryan and his crew simply began delivering food, medicine, and construction materials. They asked for nothing. Within months, Krith volunteers were serving on human ships. They were not slaves or servants. They were partners, equals, friends. The same story repeated across the galaxy. The Chadics were an insectoid species whose homeworld the Sarathi had strip-mined for 300 years. Human ships arrived with environmental restoration technology and helped them begin healing their poisoned planet. The Fenari were a small mammalian species that the Velkari had excluded from trade networks for centuries. Human merchants opened new routes and shared profits fairly. Word spread among the forgotten peoples of the galaxy. The humans kept their promises. The humans remembered their friends. The humans did not abandon those who trusted them. Species that had never mattered to anyone suddenly mattered to humanity. And one by one, they pledged their loyalty to what became known as the Terran Coalition. Ambassador Linda Pearson, who had stood helpless before the Council 20 years earlier, now represented the largest alliance in galactic history. She traveled constantly, eating with species of all sizes and cultures, offering the same deal to everyone. "Join us," she would say, "and you will never be alone. You will never be forgotten. You will never be abandoned. We promise this, and we keep our promises." The Galactic Council watched their influence crumble. Trade routes that had enriched them for millennia shifted toward Earth. Political power drained away like water from a broken vessel. Species they had dominated for centuries suddenly had options. Alternatives, friends who would actually defend them. The Sarathi representative called an emergency session. "We must stop them," she hissed, her serpentine body coiling with agitation. "They are dismantling everything we built. Our trade networks are collapsing. Our subject species are demanding independence. Another decade of this, and we will be irrelevant. How do you propose we stop them?" The Mendicon delegate rumbled. "Our military cannot match theirs. Our technology is inferior. Every advantage we once held has disappeared." Zethaner spoke quietly. "Perhaps that is the point. Perhaps they want us to understand what it feels like to be powerless. To watch everything we've built slip away while we can do nothing." "Then what do we do?" The High Speaker was silent for a long moment. He thought about the human colonel with the burn scars. He thought about the 14-year-old girl crawling through drainage tunnels while her mother screamed. He thought about the vote he had cast 20 years ago, the vote that had seemed so practical at the time. "We wait," he said finally. "We wait and we watch, and we pray that humanity's mercy is greater than our cruelty." The council chamber fell silent. For the first time in their long history, the great powers of the galaxy had nothing to say. The universe had changed. Humanity had changed it, and there was no going back. 20 years had passed since the day the Galactic Council voted to abandon humanity. 20 years since New Valencia burned. 20 years since a young ambassador named Linda Pearson had watched her faith in the galaxy shatter into pieces. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime looked the same as it had on that terrible day. The same artificial suns cast the same golden light. The same seats held representatives from dozens of species. But everything had changed. Admiral Samuel Drake walked slowly to the central podium. He was past 90 now, his body failing even as his mind remained sharp. Each step took effort. Each breath was a small victory against time. The doctors had told him he had months left, maybe weeks. He had decided to spend some of that precious time here, the place where humanity's suffering had begun. Behind him came a procession unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Representatives from 200 species walked in formation, their bodies ranging from the towering Krith to the tiny floating Janari. Each one wore a small pin on their clothing or attached to their shells or embedded in their crystalline surfaces, a simple blue circle representing Earth. The Terran coalition had grown beyond anything anyone had imagined. Species that had been rivals for centuries now stood together. Civilizations that had never spoken to each other now shared resources and knowledge freely, all because humanity had shown them a different way. Samuel reached the podium and gripped its edges to steady himself. The council members who had voted against humanity 20 years ago sat in their usual places. Some had been replaced by age or politics, but many remained. Zethaner was still high speaker, though his shell had dulled with age. The Sirathi ambassador still coiled in her water tank. The Mendicon delegate still rumbled like a living mountain. "I remember standing in this room as a young officer," Samuel began. His voice was weaker than it had once been, but the translation systems carried it to every corner of the chamber. "I came with our ambassador to celebrate humanity's acceptance into the coalition. I believed we had found our place in the galaxy." He paused, gathering his strength. "I remember the day of the vote. I watched from the observation gallery as every hand and tentacle and appendage rose against us. I watched our ambassador beg for help while our people died. I watched this council choose convenience over honor." The chamber was absolutely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. That day, I made a promise to myself. I promised that humanity would never be weak again. I promised that we would build something strong enough to survive without allies. I promised that we would make the galaxy remember us. He looked at each of the original council species in turn. The Valkyrie, the Sirathi, the Mendicon. All the others who had turned their backs, we kept that promise. We built weapons that could destroy your fleets. We developed technology that surpassed everything you had achieved in millennia. We prepared for a war that would have ended your civilizations. Samuel's voice softened. But we did not use that power for revenge. Do you know why? No one answered. The question hung in the air like a weight. Because revenge would have made us like you. Linda Pearson stepped forward to stand beside the Admiral. Her hair was gray now, her face lined with age, but her eyes still held the same fire they had carried since that terrible day. "I spent 20 years hating this council," she said. "I spent 20 years dreaming of the day when I could stand before you and watch you suffer the way my people suffered. I wanted you to feel what we felt. I wanted you to know the pain of abandonment." She looked at Zethaner, who could not meet her eyes. "But somewhere along the way, I realized something. If we destroyed you, we would be no better than the Drath who attacked us. If we conquered your worlds and enslaved your people, we would become the very thing we hated. The galaxy would simply exchange one set of cruel masters for another." Linda gestured to the representatives standing behind her. "So we chose a different path. We chose to protect instead of conquer. We chose to build instead of destroy. We chose to keep our promises even when others broke theirs." She held up a document, a simple piece of paper that contained the new Terran Coalition Charter. "This is our legacy. Any species can join, regardless of size or power. All members will be protected equally. No one will ever be abandoned. No one will ever stand alone." Admiral Samuel Drake took the document from her hands. His grip was weak, but his voice was steady. "This is what we offer. Not forgiveness, because some wounds never heal. Not forgetting, because some lessons must be remembered. But a chance. A chance to join something better than what came before." He looked directly at Zethaner. "You showed us who you were when you let our people burn. We showed you who we are by making sure no one else suffers the same fate." The chamber remained silent as Samuel and Linda stepped back from the podium. The choice was now in the hands of the council. They could accept the new order and join as equal members. They could refuse and fade into irrelevance as the Terran coalition grew stronger. There was no third option. Zethaner rose slowly from his seat. He was old, older than any Velkari had lived in recorded history. He had spent 20 years carrying the weight of his decision, watching everything his species had built crumble because of one vote. "I was wrong," he said simply. 20 years ago, I chose fear over honor. I chose safety over justice. I told myself it was the practical decision, the wise decision. I was lying to myself." His compound eyes finally met Linda's gaze. "I cannot undo what was done. I cannot bring back the dead. But I can admit my failure, and I can accept your offer." He reached for the pin that Coalition members wore. A human aide handed him one, and he attached it to his shell with trembling appendages, one by one. The other council species followed. The Sirathi ambassador coiled around her pin as she fastened it to her scales. The Mendicon delegate rumbled approval as the small symbol was embedded in his rocky surface. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia acknowledged that their time of dominance was over. The ceremony continued for hours as each species formally joined the Terran coalition. When it was finished, the galaxy had been transformed. The old order was gone. Something new had taken its place. Admiral Samuel Drake did not live to see the first anniversary of that day. He died peacefully 3 months later, surrounded by friends and colleagues who had helped him build humanity's future. His funeral was attended by representatives from every species in the coalition. Ships from 100 worlds gathered to honor the man who had turned betrayal into triumph. Linda Pearson continued serving as ambassador for another decade before retiring to New Valencia, where she spent her final years teaching children about the history they had lived through. She told them about the darkness and the pain, but she also told them about hope and honor in the choice to be better. The Terran coalition endured long after both of them were gone. It grew and changed and faced new challenges, but the core principle remained unchanged. Promises were kept. Friends were protected. No one was ever abandoned, and throughout the galaxy, species young and old learned the lesson that humanity had taught them. True strength was not found in weapons or technology or the ability to destroy. True strength was found in the courage to build something better, to keep promises even when it was hard, to protect the weak even when it cost something. The Council had betrayed Earth. They had expected humanity to fade away, to disappear into the darkness of history. They had been wrong. Humanity had emerged from that darkness stronger than before, and they had used that strength not for revenge, but for justice. That was their greatest victor.